The mess hall of Outpost Zeta 9 buzzed with the usual mixture of alien languages and mechanical translators. Steam rose from countless bowls of nutrient paste, while beings from dozens of worlds shared meals and complaints about their assignments on this backwater station. The Galactic Defense Force had established this outpost on the rim of known space, ostensibly to monitor pirate activity, but everyone knew it was really just a place to dump problem soldiers and forgotten units. At a corner table sat 5 humans, their blue and gray uniforms marking them as part of Earth's newest contribution to galactic peacekeeping. They ate in relative silence, still adjusting to the strange foods and stranger company. Their leader, Staff Sergeant Marcus Tank Rodriguez, methodically worked through his meal while observing the room's dynamics. Next to him sat Petty Officer Jake Shark Morrison, a compact man with steady hands and calculating eyes. The others, Chen, Williams, and Lopez, were good soldiers. But Morrison was different. He carried himself with a quiet confidence that came from years of specialized training back on Earth. Morrison had never told his squad mates about his previous life. As far as they knew, he was just another Navy guy who'd volunteered for the Galactic Defense Force. They didn't need to know about the missions in places that didn't officially exist, or the skills he'd learned in schools that weren't on any public record. Some things were better left unsaid, especially when serving alongside alien species who might not understand human military traditions. The relative peace of their meal was shattered when a massive figure approached their table. Corax the Destroyer stood nearly 8 feet tall, his forearms rippling with muscle beneath scarred chitin. The Vorthak warrior was legendary throughout the GDF, not just for his size, but for his confirmed kill count of over 300 enemies across 15 different campaigns. His mandibles clicked with what passed for amusement among his species as he looked down at the humans. "Well, well," Corax rumbled, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet mess hall. "The famous Earth warriors. I've heard so many stories about your species' supposed prowess in combat." He leaned down, bringing his insectoid face closer to the table. "Tell me, little pink ones, is it true that humans are actually decent fighters? Or is that just propaganda from your homeworld?" Rodriguez started to stand, but Morrison placed a calm hand on his sergeant's arm. "We're just here to eat, friend," Morrison said quietly, not looking up from his meal. "No need for trouble." Corax's mandibles clicked louder, a sound that drew nervous glances from nearby tables. Several of his Vorthak squadmates had gathered behind him, their own chittering adding to the tension. "Friend," Corax repeated, his translator making the word sound like an insult. "You mistake me, human. I am Corax the Destroyer, veteran of the Siege of Altair, conqueror of the rebel worlds, slayer of champions from a dozen species. I am no friend to untested recruits." The alien warrior reached down with one of his massive hands and flicked Morrison's meal tray, sending nutrient paste splattering across the table. "I have fought alongside Zephyrian berserkers who could tear through steel with their bare claws. I've seen crystalline warriors survive direct plasma cannon hits. But humans?" He made a dismissive gesture with his secondary arms. "Soft, weak, barely evolved primates who think they deserve a place among real warriors." Morrison slowly set down his eating utensil and looked up at Corax for the first time. His expression remained completely neutral, almost bored. "Is that so?" he asked conversationally. "Indeed it is," Corax continued, warming to his theme. Several more aliens had gathered to watch the confrontation, forming a loose circle around the human table. "Your species has no natural weapons, no armor, no enhanced strength or speed. You rely entirely on technology because you are too weak to fight like true warriors. In my culture, we settle disputes with honor, with blade and claw and strength of arm." Morrison nodded thoughtfully, as if considering this information. "Blade and claw, huh? Sounds pretty straightforward." Corax's mandibles spread wide in what might have been a grin. "Mock me if you wish, soft one, but I have personally defeated 17 different species champions in single combat. Your pathetic human physiology would last perhaps 30 seconds against a real warrior." He gestured to his squad mates. "Even my youngest battle brother could dismember you without effort." The mess hall had gone completely silent now, with even the kitchen staff leaning out to observe the confrontation. Morrison glanced around at the watching faces, then back up at Corax. "You know what? You might be right," he said with a slight shrug. "We humans are pretty soft compared to some of the species out here." Corax seemed taken aback by this easy agreement. He had clearly expected more resistance, more of the famous human stubbornness he'd heard about. Yes, exactly. It is good that you recognize your inferiority." Morrison stood up slowly, his movements casual and unthreatening. Even at his full height, he barely reached Corax's chest. "Tell you what, though. Since you're so interested in human combat capabilities, maybe you'd like a demonstration." The Vorthak warrior's 4 eyes focused intently on Morrison. "A demonstration? You wish to fight me?" His mandibles clicked with what was definitely amusement now. "Little human, I have killed beings twice your size with my bare hands." "I'm sure you have," Morrison replied pleasantly. "But I'm not talking about killing anyone. Just a friendly demonstration. Your traditional combat methods against human techniques. First one to yield loses. No weapons, no permanent damage." He spread his hands wide, showing empty palms. "Unless you're worried that this soft little primate might embarrass you in front of your friends." The challenge hung in the air like a charged particle beam. Corax's massive frame seemed to swell even larger as his pride warred with his common sense. Around them, the crowd began to murmur in various languages, some placing bets on the outcome. The smart money was heavily on the 8-foot killing machine over the human who looked like he might blow away in a stiff breeze. Rodriguez leaned close to Morrison and whispered urgently, "Jake, what the hell are you doing? This guy could literally tear your arms off." Morrison's response was so quiet, only his squad mates could hear it. "Trust me on this one, Sarge. Sometimes the best way to avoid a fight is to give someone exactly what they think they want." Corax straightened to his full imposing height, his 4 arms spreading wide. "Very well, soft one. I accept your challenge. When you are broken and bleeding on this floor, perhaps the rest of your species will learn proper respect for their betters." He turned to address the crowd. "Clear space. Let all witness how Corax the Destroyer deals with human arrogance." The assembled aliens quickly pushed tables and chairs aside, creating a rough circle about 20 feet across. Morrison rolled his shoulders and neck, working out some kinks, while Corax performed an elaborate series of stretches that showcased his impressive reach and flexibility. The Vorthak's 4 arms could attack from multiple angles simultaneously, and his chitinous skin provided natural armor against most impacts. "This human is either very brave or very stupid," commented a lizard-like saurian observer to his companion. "Given what I know of humans," replied a floating ethereal entity, "it could easily be both." Morrison stepped into the center of the circle, his posture relaxed and non-threatening. Corax entered from the opposite side, his mandibles clicking with anticipation. The size difference was even more dramatic in the open space. The alien warrior looked like he could simply step on his opponent and end the match. "Last chance to yield with honor, human," Corax offered magnanimously. "I do not wish to seriously injure you over a simple meal dispute." Morrison smiled for the first time since the confrontation began. It was a small expression, barely noticeable, but something about it made several of the more perceptive observers take a step back. "That's very thoughtful of you," he replied, "but I think I'll see this through." Korax shrugged, causing his massive shoulders to roll like tectonic plates. So be it. When you are ready to begin, attack me with whatever pathetic techniques your species has developed. Morrison nodded politely. I appreciate that. Really, I do. But there's just one thing I should probably mention before we start. And what is that, little warrior? Morrison's smile widened just a fraction. I'm not just any human friend. I'm a Navy SEAL. And where I come from, we specialize in killing things that are bigger, stronger, and supposedly better than us. The words had barely left his mouth when Morrison moved. What happened next would be debated and analyzed for months afterward by everyone present. One moment, Morrison was standing casually 5 feet away from his opponent. The next, he was inside Korax's guard, moving with a speed and precision that seemed to defy human limitations. His right hand struck like a guided missile, targeting a specific point where the alien's head met his torso. The blow landed with surgical accuracy on a nerve cluster that existed in all Vorthak physiology, but was known only to the most dedicated xenobiologists. Korax's massive frame went rigid as his entire nervous system misfired simultaneously. His forearms, which had been reaching for Morrison, suddenly couldn't coordinate properly. His mandibles opened in a silent scream as he realized he had lost all voluntary muscle control. But Morrison wasn't finished. As Korax began to topple like a felled tree, the human was already moving again. He swept behind the falling alien, one arm snaking around the thick neck while his legs locked around Korax's waist. The position looked almost gentle, like a strange embrace, but every warrior in the room recognized a perfect chokehold when they saw one. Korax's struggles grew weaker by the second as Morrison applied precise pressure to the alien's carotid arteries. The massive warrior tried to use his size advantage to slam Morrison against the floor, but the human anticipated every move, adjusting his position to maintain the hold while avoiding damage. "Sleep now," Morrison whispered, his voice carrying clearly in the deathly silent mess hall. "When you wake up, maybe you'll remember that evolution doesn't always favor the biggest predator. Sometimes it favors the smartest." Korax the Destroyer, veteran of 15 campaigns and slayer of champions, went limp in the arms of a human who weighed less than half what he did. Morrison held the position for a few seconds longer, ensuring his opponent was truly unconscious, then released the hold and stepped back. Korax collapsed to the floor with a thunderous crash that seemed to echo through the entire outpost. The mess hall remained frozen in absolute silence for nearly 30 seconds. Then, slowly, a young Zephyrian warrior began to clap. Others joined in, creating a crescendo of approval that transcended species barriers. Even Korax's own squad mates, after checking to ensure their leader was still breathing, nodded with grudging respect. Morrison straightened his uniform and walked calmly back to his table, where his speechless squad mates were still staring at the unconscious alien warrior. "Anyone know if they serve coffee on this station?" he asked conversationally as he sat down. "All this excitement has made me thirsty." Rodriguez found his voice first. "Jake, what the hell was that? How did you—" He gestured helplessly at the scene. Morrison picked up a clean eating utensil and resumed working on what remained of his meal. "Just some techniques they teach back home, Sarge. Nothing special." But Chen was studying him with new eyes. "You're not just regular Navy, are you? I mean, not that there's anything wrong with regular Navy. But that was professional," Williams finished, his voice filled with awe. "Like, really professional." Morrison chewed thoughtfully before responding. "Let's just say that Earth has some pretty good training programs, and I was lucky enough to attend some of them." He looked up at his squad mates with that same small smile. "But that's ancient history now. We're all GDF soldiers, and we've got a job to do out here." Across the mess hall, Korax was beginning to stir, his massive frame twitching as consciousness slowly returned. Morrison watched with professional interest, noting the aliens' reaction time and recovery rate for future reference. You never knew when information like that might come in handy. The incident would mark the beginning of a new chapter for the humans of Outpost Zeta 9. Word of Morrison's demonstration spread through the station with the speed of an Ansible transmission, carrying implications that none of them fully understood yet. They were no longer just the newest species to join the galactic community. They were something else entirely, something that warranted closer examination. But for now, Morrison was content to finish his meal and listen to his squad mates' amazed chatter about human combat techniques. Sometimes, he reflected, the best way to avoid future conflicts was to end the first one so decisively that no one wanted a rematch. Outside the mess hall, the stars of the Rim territories continued their ancient dance, indifferent to the small drama that had just played out. But among the beings of Outpost Zeta 9, things had changed in ways that would ripple outward through the galaxy like waves from a dropped stone. The humans were no longer just another species trying to find their place among the stars. They were something new, something dangerous, something that commanded respect even from the most veteran warriors. And Jake Morrison, finishing the last of his nutrient paste while his friends peppered him with questions, was perfectly fine with letting them think this was just another day at the office. Word of the mess hall incident spread through Outpost Zeta 9 like wildfire through dry vegetation. Within hours, every being on the station had heard some version of the story, though the details grew more elaborate with each retelling. Some claimed Morrison had moved so fast he became invisible. Others insisted he had lifted Corax completely off the ground with one hand. The truth was impressive enough, but truth rarely survived contact with a military rumor mill. Morrison found the attention uncomfortable. He had signed up for the GDF specifically to escape the spotlight, to be just another soldier doing his job in the vast anonymity of space. Now he couldn't walk down a corridor without aliens stopping their conversations to stare at him. Some looked at him with newfound respect, others with barely concealed fear, and a few with the calculating expressions of predators sizing up potential prey. "You've stirred up quite the hornet's nest," Rodriguez commented as they made their way to the morning briefing. They passed a group of crystalline soldiers who fell silent until the humans were well past. "Half the station wants to challenge you to prove themselves, and the other half wants to study you like a lab specimen." Morrison shrugged, keeping his eyes forward. "It'll blow over. These things always do. Give it a week, and they'll find something else to talk about." Chen snorted. "Yeah, right. You put down the station's biggest badass in front of half the GDF. That's not exactly something people forget." The briefing room was already crowded when they arrived, filled with the usual mixture of species and uniforms. Commander Thexara, a tall ethereal with translucent blue skin, floated at the front of the room while holographic displays showed patrol routes and threat assessments. Her species communicated primarily through electromagnetic fields, but she wore a vocal translator out of courtesy to the air-breathing majority. "Attention, personnel," she announced, her artificially generated voice carrying easily through the room. "We have received updated intelligence regarding increased pirate activity in the Kepler sector. Multiple shipping lanes have been compromised, and merchant vessels are requesting escort protection." Morrison listened with half his attention, while mentally cataloging the other beings in the room. Old habits died hard, and situational awareness was a skill that had kept him alive through too many missions to ignore now. He noted the positioning of potential threats, exit routes, and the general mood of the assembled soldiers. 3 tables away, Corax sat with his Vorthak squad mates, a large bandage covering the side of his neck where Morrison's strike had landed. The massive alien's eyes kept drifting toward the humans, but there was something different in his expression now. The casual arrogance was gone, replaced by what Morrison recognized as professional respect mixed with wounded pride. "Patrol assignments are posted on your personal communicators," Commander Thex Ara continued. "Human Squad 7, you are assigned to escort duty for Merchant Convoy Designation Charlie 57. Departure is at 1400 hours. Rodriguez nodded, already checking his communicator for mission details. Escort duty was routine work, boring but necessary. They would shadow a group of freighters through contested space, watching for pirate activity and responding to any threats that materialized. It was exactly the kind of assignment Morrison preferred. Straightforward, clearly defined, with minimal opportunities for complications. After the briefing, the squad gathered in their assigned quarters to review mission parameters and check their equipment. Their accommodations were Spartan but functional. 5 bunks, a small common area, and enough storage for their personal gear. Earth's contribution to the GDF was still new enough that human-specific facilities were improvised rather than purpose-built. "Looks like a milk run," Williams observed, studying the convoy route on his tablet. "Standard shipping lane, minimal pirate activity in the last 6 months. We'll probably spend 3 days watching freighters haul cargo and trying not to die of boredom." Lopez was cleaning his rifle with the methodical precision of a born soldier. "Don't jinx it. Every time someone says a mission's going to be boring, we end up fighting for our lives." Morrison was examining his own gear with equal attention to detail. Military equipment in space required constant maintenance. The environment was harsh enough without adding mechanical failures to the list of things that could kill you. His rifle was a standard GDF energy weapon, reliable but not particularly sophisticated compared to some of the hardware he'd used in his previous life. "Jake," Chen said quietly, "can I ask you something?" Morrison looked up from his weapon inspection. "Shoot." "Back on Earth, before the GDF, what did you really do? I mean, I know you were Navy, but that move you pulled on Korax wasn't something they teach in basic training." The question hung in the air like an unexploded munition. Morrison's squad mates were good people, and they deserved honesty. But some truths were classified beyond their clearance levels, and others were simply too dangerous to share in an environment where dozens of alien species might be listening. "I was part of a specialized unit," Morrison said finally. "We handled situations that required particular skill sets. Nothing I can talk about in detail, but the training was comprehensive." Rodriguez set down his equipment and gave Morrison a direct look. "Comprehensive enough to take down alien warriors twice your size without breaking a sweat?" Morrison smiled ruefully. "Sarge, if you think what happened to Korax was impressive, you've led a sheltered life. There are guys back home who could have ended that fight in half the time using techniques that would make your hair curl." The implications of that statement settled over the squad like a heavy blanket. They had always known Earth was a violent world by galactic standards. The planet's history of constant warfare was one of the reasons many species had been reluctant to accept human membership in the GDF. But they were beginning to understand that human military capability might be significantly underestimated by their alien colleagues. "Jesus," Williams muttered. "How many people like you did Earth send out here?" Morrison returned to cleaning his weapon. "Enough," he said simply. Their escort ship, the GDF corvette Steadfast Resolve, departed outpost Zeta 9 precisely on schedule. Morrison appreciated the punctuality. It spoke well of Commander Thexara's efficiency. The ship itself was a standard multi-species design, built to accommodate the various environmental requirements of the GDF's diverse membership. Human-compatible atmosphere in some sections, methane breathers in others, and even a specialized compartment for the energy-based ethereals. The convoy they were escorting consisted of 6 merchant freighters hauling everything from agricultural products to manufactured goods. Standard commercial traffic, the economic lifeblood that connected the various worlds of the galactic community. Pirates targeted these convoys not for their cargo, but for the ransoms they could demand and the protection fees they could extort from future shipments. Morrison stood watch on the bridge, monitoring long-range sensors for any signs of trouble. Space combat was different from terrestrial operations in almost every conceivable way, but the fundamental principles remained the same. Know your environment, understand your enemy's capabilities, and always have an exit strategy. "Contact," announced sensor operator Vixtal, a spider-like arachnoid whose multiple limbs allowed her to interface with several monitoring systems simultaneously. 3 ships approaching from Vector 7 Mark IV, moving to intercept the convoy. Commander Thexara's electromagnetic field shifted to indicate heightened alertness. Classification? Configuration matches known pirate vessels, Scarab-class raiders, modified for speed and firepower. They're broadcasting demands for the convoy to heave to and prepare for boarding. Morrison felt the familiar sensation of pre-combat adrenaline beginning to flow through his system. His training had taught him to welcome that feeling. It sharpened reflexes and heightened awareness, as long as you didn't let it control your decision-making. "Standard pirate tactics," he observed to Rodriguez, who was standing nearby. "Fast ships, hit-and-run approach. They'll try to disable our engines first, then pick off the freighters one by one." Rodriguez nodded grimly. "Any suggestions?" Morrison studied the tactical display, noting the pirates' approach vector and the convoy's current formation. "They're expecting us to play defense, to stay close to the merchants and react to their moves. What if we don't?" Before Rodriguez could respond, Commander Thexara's voice cut through the bridge chatter. "Human Squad 7 to the ready room. Prepare for possible boarding action." The squad quickly assembled in the ship's small armory, checking weapons and donning their protective gear. Space combat often involved boarding actions. Disabled ships became prizes to be captured rather than destroyed, especially when valuable cargo was involved. "Listen up," Rodriguez addressed his team as they suited up. "Standard anti-piracy protocols. Protect the convoy, minimize civilian casualties, and try not to start any galactic incidents. Questions?" Morrison raised his hand. "Rules of engagement? Defend yourselves and the merchants. Use whatever force is necessary." Morrison nodded, satisfied. Clear, simple orders were the best kind. No political complications, no moral ambiguities. Just soldiers doing what soldiers did best. The ship shuddered as the first enemy energy blasts struck their shields. Through the armored viewports, they could see the sleek shapes of the pirate raiders maneuvering for attack positions. The merchant freighters were already beginning evasive maneuvers, but their heavy cargo loads made them slow and clumsy compared to the purpose-built warships. "Boarding pods detected," announced the tactical officer. "They're going for the lead freighter." Morrison felt his training take over completely. The careful civilian persona he had maintained for months fell away like a discarded costume, revealing the professional soldier underneath. His squad mates noticed the change immediately. The easygoing Navy guy was gone, replaced by something colder and infinitely more dangerous. "Sarge," he said quietly, "request permission to handle the boarding party." Rodriguez looked at him sharply. "Jake, we're supposed to work as a team here." Morrison's smile was nothing like the pleasant expression his friends were used to seeing. "We will be working as a team, Sarge. You'll be providing covering fire while I teach these pirates why humans earned our reputation the hard way." Outside, space lit up with energy weapons and missile trails as the battle for the convoy began in earnest. But Morrison's attention was focused entirely on the approaching boarding pods, calculating vectors and timing his response. He had fought pirates before, in waters far from here, and the principles remained unchanged. Pirates relied on fear and overwhelming force to subdue their victims. They were used to facing merchant crews and lightly armed security forces. They were not prepared for what was about to happen to them. "Contact in 60 seconds. reported the tactical officer. Morrison checked his weapon one final time and moved toward the airlock. Game time, he murmured, and his squad mates felt a collective chill run down their spines. Whatever Jake Morrison had been before joining the GDF, they were about to see him in his natural element. The boarding pod struck the freighter's hull with metallic clangs that resonated through the ship's structure. Morrison watched the cutting beams begin their work, knowing that in moments, armed pirates would be pouring through the breach. Standard procedure would be to wait for them to board, then engage in corridor fighting where the defender's knowledge of the ship layout provided an advantage. But Morrison had never been particularly interested in standard procedure. "Change of plans," he announced. "We're going to meet them halfway." Rodriguez stared at him. "Jake, that's insane. We don't know how many of them there are or what kind of weapons they're carrying." Morrison was already moving toward the emergency airlock. "Sarge, trust me on this one. I've done this before." He paused at the threshold. "But if anyone wants to sit this one out, I completely understand. This isn't exactly what you signed up for." Chen stepped up beside him without hesitation. "Like hell, we're letting you have all the fun." Williams and Lopez exchanged glances, then followed suit. Rodriguez sighed heavily but moved to join them. "This is either going to be the shortest boarding action on record, or we're all going to die in space like idiots." Morrison's grin was sharp as a blade. "Only one way to find out, Sarge." The airlock cycled open, and 5 human soldiers stepped into the void between ships, moving with deadly purpose toward an enemy that had no idea what kind of predator was coming for them. In the vast darkness of space, another chapter of humanity's reputation was about to be written in fire and blood. The vacuum of space embraced Morrison and his squad like an old friend. Their environmental suits were standard GDF issue, bulky and uncomfortable compared to the specialized equipment he had used in his previous life, but functional enough for what he had planned. Through his helmet's display, he could see the pirate boarding pods attached to the merchant freighter like metallic parasites. "Thermal scans show 12 hostiles inside the lead pod," Chen reported over the comm channel, his voice steady despite the insanity of their situation. "They're still cutting through the hull." Morrison activated his suit's maneuvering thrusters, gliding silently through the void toward their target. The pirates were focused entirely on their breach operation, confident that no one would be crazy enough to attack them in open space. It was exactly the kind of tactical blindness that Morrison had learned to exploit. "Remember," Rodriguez's voice crackled through the comm system, "these are criminals, not enemy combatants. We need at least some of them alive for questioning." Morrison's laugh was cold as the vacuum around them. "Don't worry, Sarge. I'll leave you a few to interrogate." The first pirate never saw what killed him. Morrison's approach was perfectly silent, perfectly timed, and absolutely lethal. His vibroblade sliced through the alien's environmental suit with surgical precision, causing explosive decompression that ended the fight before it began. The pirate's scream died in the vacuum, along with everything else. Chaos erupted inside the boarding pod as the surviving pirates realized they were under attack from an impossible direction. These were experienced criminals, hardened by years of raiding merchant ships and fighting security forces, but they had never encountered anything like a human Navy SEAL operating in his preferred environment. Morrison moved through their ranks like death itself, his every action calculated for maximum efficiency and psychological impact. His second target was the squad leader, identifiable by his ornate armor and the way the others deferred to him. Morrison's rifle spoke once, a precise energy pulse that overloaded the alien suit systems and left him floating helplessly in space. "What in the 7 hells?" one of the surviving pirates screamed into his communicator. "Where did they come from? How are they moving so fast?" Morrison answered by appearing directly behind the speaker, his vibroblade finding the weak point in the alien's armor with practiced ease. The pirate's weapon spun away into the void, along with the hand that had been holding it. Lopez and Williams had reached the second boarding pod by now, their approach covered by Morrison's devastating assault on the first group. The pirates in the second pod were trying to coordinate a defense, but human combat doctrine emphasized speed, violence, and overwhelming force applied at the enemy's weakest point. "This is impossible," gasped a wounded Saurian pirate as Morrison disabled his breathing apparatus with clinical precision. "Humans don't fight like this. Intelligence said you were soft, weak, barely evolved." Morrison's response was delivered in the pirate's own language, learned during a classified mission years ago. "Your intelligence was wrong about a lot of things. Human evolution favored persistence hunters, pack predators who could track prey across continents and kill things 10 times their size through cooperation and tool use. We didn't develop claws or armor because we didn't need them." He gestured toward the floating bodies of the pirate boarding party. "We developed something better. We developed the ability to turn anything into a weapon and the intelligence to use those weapons more effectively than any other species in known space." The surviving pirates were attempting to retreat back to their main ship, but Chen had anticipated this move. The demolitions expert had spent his approach time planting charges on the boarding pod's docking mechanisms. When he triggered the explosives, the pirates found themselves trapped between the wreckage of their equipment and an enemy who seemed to materialize out of empty space whenever they least expected it. "Surrender," Rodriguez broadcasted on an open channel, "and we'll take you alive. Continue fighting. And my specialist here will demonstrate why humans earned their reputation as the galaxy's apex predators." Morrison was already moving toward the main pirate vessel, his suit's thrusters leaving no visible trail in the vacuum. The ship's external weapons were designed for ship-to-ship combat, useless against a single human-sized target moving with unpredictable vectors. Its armor plating might as well have been tissue paper against someone who knew exactly where to place shaped charges for maximum effect. The pirate captain was screaming orders at his crew, trying to coordinate a response to an attack that defied every tactical assumption his species had developed over millennia of warfare. How is one human destroying an entire boarding party? Activate the defense screens, launch interceptor drones. Do something! But Morrison had already reached the ship's engine compartment. His demolition charges were small but precisely placed, designed to disable rather than destroy. The pirates would need their ship intact for the long journey to a GDF detention facility. The explosions sent shockwaves through the hull, and suddenly the pirate vessel found itself drifting helplessly in space. Its weapons systems flickered and died as power conduits were severed with surgical precision. Emergency lights cast eerie shadows through the corridors as the crew realized they were now trapped with a human boarding party that fought like nothing they had ever encountered. "Attention, pirate vessel!" Commander Thexera's voice echoed through space from the GDF corvette. "You are disabled and surrounded. Surrender immediately or face the consequences." The pirate captain stared at his tactical displays in disbelief. In less than 10 minutes, a single human soldier had neutralized 2 boarding parties and crippled his ship. The merchant convoy they had come to raid was continuing on its route as if nothing had happened, while his own crew was now facing the prospect of hand-to-hand combat against beings that apparently considered vacuum warfare a routine Tuesday afternoon. Morrison's voice crackled over the emergency frequency. "Captain, this is Petty Officer Morrison of the Galactic Defense Force. Your ship is disabled, your boarding parties are neutralized, and you have approximately 30 seconds to surrender before I come aboard and finish this personally." There was a long pause before the pirate captain responded. "What? What are you?" Morrison's laugh was genuinely amused. "I'm just a guy from Earth, Captain. Nothing special. But where I come from, we have a saying. The only easy day was yesterday. You picked the wrong convoy to raid, and now you get to find out why humans don't need claws or armor to be effective predators." The surrender came 15 seconds later. The aftermath of the battle was almost anticlimactic. The surviving pirates were taken into custody without further resistance, their weapons and equipment confiscated according to GDF protocols. The damaged boarding pods were retrieved for evidence, and the disabled pirate vessel was taken under tow for analysis. Morrison floated in space for a few extra minutes, ostensibly checking for additional threats, but actually enjoying the peace and quiet of the vacuum. Space operations had always been his favorite type of mission, clean, simple, with clearly defined objectives and minimal collateral damage. "Jake," Rodriguez's voice interrupted his meditation, "you might want to get back to the ship. Commander Thexara wants to debrief us, and she's got some questions." Morrison sighed and activated his thrusters. "Copy that, Sarge. On my way." The debriefing room on the Steadfast Resolve was crowded with senior officers from multiple species, all wanting to understand exactly how 5 humans had managed to neutralize a 12-ship pirate operation in under 20 minutes. Commander Thexara's electromagnetic field was cycling through patterns that indicated intense curiosity mixed with professional concern. "Petty Officer Morrison," she began, her translated voice carefully neutral. "Your tactical assessment indicated that you had previous experience with similar operations. Can you elaborate on that experience?" Morrison stood at attention, his expression giving nothing away. "Ma'am, my previous service involved specialized training in hostile environment operations. The specific details are classified above my current clearance level." The commander's field shifted to indicate skepticism. "Classified by whom? Earth's government? Your previous military command? Some organization unknown to the GDF?" "Ma'am, I'm not authorized to discuss the specifics of my background or training. What I can tell you is that the mission was completed successfully with minimal casualties and no collateral damage." One of the other officers, a massive ursine creature with cybernetic enhancements, leaned forward. "Morrison, what you accomplished out there was unprecedented. I've been fighting pirates for 40 years, and I've never seen anything like it. Either you're the most gifted natural warrior in galactic history, or your species has military capabilities that far exceed what you've shared with the GDF. Morrison met the alien's gaze steadily. "With respect, sir, I think you're overestimating what happened out there. I had good intelligence, superior positioning, and an enemy that underestimated human capabilities. Those advantages, combined with standard military training, were sufficient to complete the mission." Commander Thexara made a note on her tablet. "Standard military training, is that what Earth calls the ability to conduct solo boarding actions in open space?" "Ma'am, every human military service includes training in hostile environment operations. Space is just another hostile environment." The questioning continued for another hour, but Morrison gave nothing away beyond the basic facts of the engagement. His squad mates were interviewed separately, but they could only describe what they had observed, not the techniques or training that made such actions possible. Finally, Commander Thexara dismissed them with a warning that their actions would be reviewed by GDF Command and that further questions might be forthcoming. Morrison accepted the warning with the same neutral professionalism he had maintained throughout the debriefing. Later that evening, the squad gathered in their quarters to decompress from the day's events. The mood was subdued. They had all witnessed something that changed their understanding of human military capability, and the implications were unsettling. "Jake," Chen said quietly, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be straight with me." Morrison looked up from the equipment maintenance he was performing. "Shoot. How many of you are there? I mean, people with your level of training, people who can do what you did today." Morrison considered the question carefully. These men were his squad mates, his brothers in arms, and they deserved as much truth as he could give them. "More than you'd think, fewer than you'd hope," he said finally. "Earth has several specialized units that train people for situations like today. We don't advertise their existence, and we don't volunteer information about their capabilities. Williams shook his head in amazement. Jesus Christ. No wonder the aliens are nervous about letting us into the GDF. They probably think we're all walking weapons of mass destruction. We're not, Morrison replied firmly. Most humans are exactly what they appear to be, decent people trying to make a living in a complicated galaxy. But when someone threatens our friends, our families, or our responsibilities, he shrugged. Well, sometimes it's useful to have options. Rodriguez had been unusually quiet throughout the conversation. Now he looked directly at Morrison with the expression of a man who had reached an uncomfortable conclusion. Jake, you didn't volunteer for the GDF to see the galaxy or serve your planet, did you? You're here on a mission. Morrison's smile was sad but genuine. Sarge, I'm here for the same reason you are. To do my job, serve with good people, and maybe make the galaxy a little bit safer in the process. The only difference is that I've had some additional training along the way. The conversation gradually wound down, but the implications lingered in the air like smoke from a distant fire. Somewhere in the vast bureaucracy of the GDF, reports were being written and filed that would eventually make their way to the highest levels of galactic government. Questions would be asked about human military capabilities, Earth's long-term intentions, and the wisdom of accepting such a demonstrably dangerous species into the galactic community. But for now, in the quiet of their shared quarters, 5 human soldiers simply tried to process what they had experienced. They had always known their species was different from their alien colleagues, more violent, more aggressive, shaped by millennia of constant warfare. Today they had learned that the difference was greater than any of them had imagined. Morrison finished his equipment maintenance and settled into his bunk, listening to the familiar sounds of a ship traveling through hyperspace. Tomorrow would bring new missions, new challenges, and probably new opportunities to demonstrate human capabilities to an increasingly nervous galactic community. He was perfectly fine with that. After all, as he had learned long ago in training facilities that didn't officially exist, the best way to keep the peace was to make sure everyone understood the consequences of breaking it. Outside their viewport, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, indifferent to the small dramas playing out among the travelers who moved between them. But in the growing files of the Galactic Defense Force, a new understanding was taking shape about the species from Sol 3, the planet they called Earth. Humans weren't just another member species seeking their place among the stars. They were something much more dangerous and much more valuable than anyone had previously understood. The question now was what the galaxy intended to do with that knowledge. In the end, Morrison reflected as he drifted toward sleep, that would be someone else's problem. He was just a soldier doing his job, one mission at a time in the vast darkness between the stars.